Hey everyone, today is the first part of our three steps about data work. When you work with data, you better think about three steps. First, where is input? And once you get input, locate your data source, how you're going to process them. Once you have cleaned them, manipulate them, and also validate them, the last step is how to present them, which we call it output. But today we're going to focus just step one, which is input. Input consists several parts. The first part will be your data source. Second, what is the quality of your data? Most importantly, how far you are away from the truth. Because sometimes when you get a data source, that so-called source is manipulated by your IT department. You tell them what you need, but when you get them, it's already been touched. So sometimes you will get the data by yourself. So jump into database, use some SQL or just ODBC connector to connect to the database directly to see the true faith of your information. Today's topic is not going to be focusing on you download something that IT has a query for you and you do it every day sort of things. We already cleaned the pathway. Everything you got is the raw source. So today, let's just jump into the topic, how we get our data into Excel. Or we can say make a connection. In Excel, over the top, there's several menus for you to work on. And most importantly is the data section. In the data pane, you can see for the first part, it's called get and transform data. This is where you make a linkage between this Excel workbook and also your data source. Some of the linkage, once you ingest it, your data is dying. There's no link between your Excel and also your data source. But most eco-friendly way to get connect data is by connecting them with a live link. For example, here we're going to say we are connecting one of our database. So from a database option, you have several database waiting here for you to connect. Most importantly, you have this kind of Microsoft Access. We can also talk about Access build up database in the future. But today we're going to connect to our data warehouse. The data warehouse I'm using here is Google BigQuery. BigQuery is the centralized data warehouse under the brand of Google. And you need to go into the other resources, and here there's an option saying called ODBC. ODBC, in order to use that to connect to your BigQuery data warehouse, first you need Google Service Account. Second, you need some warehouse setup in the Google Cloud. And third, you need also installed a connector which is installed in your Windows PC. In that way, you can use that connector. So once I click this ODBC, I will have this from ODBC open. Here I have data source name. By default is this DBase files, but my one, since I've already included that connector into my PC, so I have this Google BigQuery option. If I click that, if you expand this advanced option, you have a chance to write a SQL directly to query your data. But in that way, we're touching the data. So I'm not going to touch the data anyway. So I'm just going to load that into Excel, see how it goes. So first you go into the OK section, and then you have this navigator menu open. It's going to open that ODBC BigQuery directly. Under that, I have a data set. And under this data set, I have two schemas. The first one is the one that we're going to use, database intro. So I create those manually through the web, through Google BigQuery service. So I have 4 tables, 2 views. We can come across some SQL concept over here. So you can see there's a little header over the top of this icon is presenting that this is a table. Same to what you can see in the Excel table. So all of this icon is representing that this is a table. But if you have 2 tables, say they are overlay each other, this means that this is a script in SQL and it consists of multiple tables. So that's a view. So view is actually a template table that you stitch different tables together by some common field. So views won't occupy any space only until you run it. So it will do the calculation, transformation, whatsoever you command in the script, only run into the RAM memory when you actually use it. So when you're not using it, it's not going to occupy any spaces. So it's an efficient way to manipulate your data to make a connection between different tables. But here we're going to just talk about the playground in Excel. So we're not going to learn how to create views. But here instead, we're going to ingest these 4 tables. So in order to select all of them in one go, you can just hit this button, then you have this little box. So you tick them all. So those are the foundation raw tables, 4 raw tables in the database, which called database underscore intro. And then I'm going to click transform data. Once I have the transform data open, you can see I'm now opening window which is in the Power Query editors. So now actually you're already make the linkage between the raw source, which is the database, which is the data warehouse, BigQuery, and the Excel. So you can do nothing. You can just do nothing and just close and load, see how it goes. Now you can see all of those 4 original tables have been ingested as a shape of table. And each of the table, if I select this part, you can see that's the name. It's matching the query name over this section. If I go into the customer table, you can see this is the customer table. I have this customer query over here. Each query is actually each ingestion. You make connection between your raw source and also Power Queries. And you can see they say 10 rows loaded, means that on this canvas, you have 10 rows. You can see 10 rows has been loaded into this canvas. So there's a connection between, so this is a raw source. This is your Power Query. This is Excel. So you're using Power Query to make connection between your Excel and also the raw source. But if you don't like this kind of raw data into this kind of Excel, which make it very abandoned, so you can just select all of them. You can just delete. If you right click, there's a delete button. But you just notice over here, if I click delete, I will have this pop-up window. You can say delete. Once I delete, each of the connection is still there, but there's these comments say connection only, which means the data is now loaded back into Excel, but the connection is still there. So if we're going to edit this, we're going to jump back to the Power Query. If I go into the source about applied step, you can see it's still connected to my source and still showing me all the columns of that table. But instead of having multiple tabs for those raw source, they are actually just existing in the form of connection. The good thing about this part is you're not putting any burden on this Excel on your local machine, because every time when you try to talk to the data, it's gonna start computing, start ingestion. But other than that, there's nothing gonna happen, because for each of that, you have a property setting. If I bring this up, you can see this is an enable setting for the background refresh, but also you can intervene that kind of refresh rate to increase that or decrease that, or even just to refresh data whenever you open the file. So there's multiple ways you can make your workflow more smooth and more efficient. And the good thing is about that, you're actually hiding the connection. Most of the time, you don't want people to explore that, because you say you have some security concern, you have something you don't want people to touch. So that's a good way to have that. So in order to have that pane open on the right hand side, just go into data pane, right click this queries and connections. Now you have that. So now let's conclude the first part of our data work step. Data work step 1 is getting the input, means that where is the source, the repository of our data home. In this case, our data home is actually in a data warehouse. Centralized data warehouse is in the BigQuery. Once you get the source of the data, then you're going to make a connection. The connection we're using is using the ODBC. And before using that, you need to have the connector installed. If you want to connect any database, there's supposed to be a driver section for you to include that driver. Once you install that driver, you will be able to connect your database through that driver. In my case, it's the ODBC and Google BigQuery. So that's what I get. And once you get a connection, your data is pending in the background for you to do the next step. So in the next clip, we're going to introduce you to the data work step 2, which is processing. See you guys in the next one.